you've stopped having creative output. So your release cadence has slowed down. Maybe you've just stopped altogether. And in a industry, in a social media landscape in the world today, if you stop producing what it is that you produce, music, things are going to feel like they slow down a little bit.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast brought to you by Entrepreneur.io.
What's up, Indies? Welcome back to the Creative Juice podcast. This is episode 319, and we're going to be talking today about your music career, why it might be stalling out, slowing down, feeling like molasses is hitting the growth levers of your music career. I'm your host, Jack McCarthy. With me, as always, is Circa. Circa, are you ready to talk about slowing down?
I'm super ready. I'm pumped to talk about slowing down.
Me too. These are the 5 reasons that we see artists slow down in their careers. What might be going on? I've got some stories to share from the agency as well. These 5 reasons I think can be mixed and matched, and they happen for different artists at different times, and there might be a myriad of reasons that these things happen in their careers. But a lot of times we get questions of like, man, it just seems like things are not hitting the way they used to, or I'm just not getting as many fans, not as many people are engaging with me, and I don't really know why. I don't really know what's happening. My revenue is dropping. Holy crap, I've got no money. That's a scary one. All of these kind of conversations have come up over years of working with artists and bands. And so I want to talk about it today. Talk about why things stall so that you can avoid these kind of things happening.
Yeah, it can definitely be not obvious why things are going awry. In some cases, it should be a little obvious, but it's not easy when you're in that situation to know, like, what should I do? So hopefully this episode serves as those clear instructions.
Yeah, that's often the conversation that comes up is like, oh man, things are just not going well, and I don't know what it means for things to not be going well. Like, there's all sorts of warning signs or red flags that might point to a stalling out or a slowing down in a business. We've talked about this kind of stuff on the show before. Actually, we'll link back to an episode that we did probably mid last year where we talked about some mistakes that an artist was making around their music business and what they did to kind of pull themselves out of it. Because some of the stories, I think, and some of the reasons that we're going to talk about today are interrelated to that example. But I want to dive in here and talk about like stalling out and what it means, because there's really like 5 areas that I will ask an artist or a band to critically look at to be like, all right, why are things changing for you? The first one, and this is most critical, I think, for creative types, people who have fans that love them for the work, the art that they produce, is you've stopped having creative output. So your release cadence has slowed down. Maybe you've just stopped altogether. And in a industry, in a social media landscape in the world today, if you stop producing what it is that you produce, music, things are going to feel like they slow down a little bit. Your fans might get a little like antsy or wonder like what's next. And so a slowed release cadence is one of the first areas that I look at to be like, all right, well, have you just stopped making music? Have you stopped putting stuff out? This goes further than just music too. I've seen this with YouTubers, content creators, all sorts of creative industries or creative entrepreneurs. But music is definitely a good one to point to, since that's kind of our primary people that we talk to here.
Yeah, and I'm guilty of this myself, where like, exigent circumstances, but I had to slow down with my project, Some Kid Punk, in terms of release cadence. And sure enough, like when we stopped releasing music as often, the monthly listeners went down. Obviously, we stopped promoting as much at the same time, and there were less reasons to promote with like new singles coming out all the time. But yeah, it's hard to keep up with the task of creating and releasing. And it's definitely like the first thing that can impact you when you do slow down.
For sure, yeah. And I think it's particularly hard for artists who might be past an album cycle, or they've been going through an album cycle. The prospect of now getting into the next thing that you're going to be releasing can be challenging. This is an area where I often encourage artists to continue to think about creating, even, basically once you release something, whether it's a single or a body of work like an EP or an album, start getting ready to have the next thing on the back burner. long before that first thing gets released, or, like that first calendar event happens, because you're going to want to keep up with the speed at which content flows. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more here in a second with regards to just content in general. But I think that applies to your releases, and you might not like that. I get it. It's a hard pill to swallow. Like, I'm definitely the kind of creative that's like, I want to just put out a body of work and then work towards my next thing and kind of be in the shadows and be in the studio and make the music and write the songs and kind of go quiet. But it's not good for your business to do that. It's a hard tug of war to work through.
Yeah, for sure. It's the case that like you can take the time that you're going to have and you would have had to slow down and just plan for it a little bit differently and not slow down. Because with Some Kid Punk, if we had just not, and this was to our detriment anyways, is like if we had just not released a new single every 2 weeks, if we had gone to a month, then we would have doubled the amount of time that we were releasing. So yeah, being a little bit strategic about like, what are my resources? What can I afford to create on a monthly, on a quarterly basis, and on a weekly basis? And then how can I program out my release cadence such that I don't go dry?
Yeah, that's so good, man. I was just having a conversation with one of our clients at the agency about this and the videos that they release. They're a YouTube content creator, and the challenge that they're up against, or were up against, was they got into a dry spell where they weren't dropping videos as frequently. And then when they did, the engagement just wasn't there because the fans they felt like they were taking the foot off the gas and not doing as much. The fans their attention went somewhere else. And so it took time to kind of build back up to that same momentum again. And that's one of the pitfalls if you fall out of cadence and you're not strategic about how you're, releasing content. It can make for a dip, which feels like a stall. So that's number one. And I want to dive into number two here, which is your content, whether it's your content cadence or your content is just lacking. And this has less to do with like the music that you're releasing or like the art that you're releasing, your product, and has more to do with the social content and the online presence that you're creating around yourself. If you're either kind of lackluster with what you're putting out there, not really putting a whole lot of effort or heart behind it, or it's just sparse and sporadic and not really intentional, that can really, really make things feel like they're stalled out. And I see a lot of artists fall into this trap where they start to kind of phone it in when things are going well. Like you go viral and then you phone it in with your content. And then, 2 or 3 months down the line, you wonder why the people that were in your world and engaging with you all of a sudden aren't. Well, it's not all of a sudden. It's been kind of the long tail effect of you phoning it in. Not to be hypercritical or anything like that, but that's really what this second point is about. It's about like falling off in terms of how you show up.
Yeah. And like, dude, there will be a point at which the romanticism of starting a project or taking it seriously for the first time will wane. There are hard months where it's hard to muster the same amount of excitement and motivation and enthusiasm for what you're doing. And so again, I'll go back to like, you probably can avoid the impact of that to some degree or another if you plan for it. If you assume it's going to happen, then as you're planning out not only release cadence, but promotional cadence, which we'll get into, you can plan for these lulls and, have some acorns stored up for that when it comes, you're not screwed.
Yeah, it's true. A lot of our clients are really good at this when it comes to their memberships, for example. I often recommend artists like, you get excited about building something like a membership. And this point about content isn't entirely tied to or exclusively tied to like a Patreon or a membership site or anything like that. I'm talking about just your general online presence. But memberships are a good area to pick on because it's kind of your deep online presence where fans are paying you for exclusive access to something. And you get excited about that when you're first building it, right? And it's easy in the first moments of like, oh my gosh, people are signing up for this. It's so cool. People want exclusive access, early access, whatever it is, behind the scenes content. They want to hang out with me and they want to pay for that. Like, that's cool. And it's easy to be excited about that in the beginning. And it's really easy to fall away from that excitement fast. And what I often recommend to artists before you even think about launching a membership is like, have a backlog. It's like having a savings account, right? For your business. It's like having an emergency fund.
Okay, Dad.
Yeah, have an emergency fund of content that you can use in a membership site, on social, online, wherever you hang out, wherever you're engaging with your fans. Have something that protects you from the lull, like you were saying, Cirque.
Yeah.
The third area where artists feel stalled out and why it happens is traffic, right? I just don't feel like I'm growing anymore. And let's say whether points 1 and 2 are covered or not, point number 3 follows shortly thereafter. If whether you're releasing music frequently or you're not, this one can definitely be a big area of struggle where it can really make things feel like you're stalling out. Is like, I'm just not growing. I'm not getting new people into my world. I don't have a way to generate awareness. And I think this is a particularly hard one for artists who like hit a ceiling because they've been doing, maybe you've been releasing music consistently and you've been going the organic social route and really trying to pump out content to kind of hit viral beats, and you're finding yourself in a rut where it's like, man, no matter what I do, I can't seem to break past a barrier. What that usually means, or what that usually looks like, and where I kind of pay attention and point people in a different direction, is that means that like you need to consider a new way of getting traffic. And a lot of times I point to paid ads on social for kind of attacking this area and being like, oh, well, like if you need more awareness, then put some money behind what you've been doing and it will probably help break this barrier, or it can help break this barrier. Maybe you were running ads and you turned them off for whatever reason. This can be one area where you stall out because you've hit a ceiling or because you've never quite cracked what you were working towards. Your consistency fell out like we talked about. But traffic systems and how you get new attention is a big area where if you stop doing it, it's not long before you start to feel like things are slowing down. And this is true of all kinds of businesses too.
Yeah, there's a myriad different reasons why it can happen, but yeah, it's just like the other two, it's bound to happen. And I think in this category, it's a lot more often due to environmental factors or factors beyond your control than it is to like, you stop doing something, you did something wrong. Just sort of like the wanes and waxes of a dynamic, complex system.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to make about all of these is as much as they can be looked at independently, they're really interdependent, these 5 factors. And so when I talk to artists who are feeling stalled out and they're like, I don't know what's going on, I think that's what makes it so challenging to figure out where a music career is slowing down is you've got these kind of interdependent factors that are all working off of each other. It's not as simple as like a local business or something like that, where it's like, oh, well, I stopped advertising and so customers stopped coming in. It's not quite that simple.
Yeah, it is the case that like campaigns have a lifespan, funnels have a lifespan, or just like systems and processes have a lifespan. They normally expire due to something beyond your control, changing ecosystems, changing platforms, changing social dynamics, changing expectations of your audience. I think what's most important in terms of a crucial skill to get over this kind of hump is your ability to adapt and also your ability to recognize when something is not working anymore. There's a great kitschy fundamental business mindset / psychology like mindset book called Who Moved My Cheese? And it's this like allegory of like 2 rats in a maze, and they search and search until they find this cheese. I think it's 2 pairs of rats. And then every day this hand reaches in and puts a new block of cheese there. And it goes on for some time. And then eventually like the cheese stops coming in every morning. And immediately one pair of rats bolts off to find more cheese. And the other 2 stick behind, like, surely the cheese will come back. We just got to hold through this. Like, it's going to be fine. And that just goes to show you that, like, yeah, like that first pair was probably smart. They recognized something has changed. This is not normal. We've been here for X amount of days and the cheese always comes. Let's go find more cheese.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the allegory. And I'm glad you brought that up because I think this is something that we've seen even in the indie pro community over the years is like, there are sort of 2 camps of the things that I used to do or the things that I even learned to do and learned to do well aren't working anymore. It's the folks who are like, okay, it's not working anymore. I know why. It's because I have to adapt. The change from the popularity of long form content, native content on social to short form vertical is a big example of this, right? And how it applies to a traffic system for getting new fans versus people who are just like, yeah, I just don't know. Like I used to run that video ad campaign and it was such a good video, man. And it just doesn't, I don't know why it doesn't work anymore. You think it's the targeting? No, probably not. Probably not.
Yeah. I think a lot of times one thing that maybe escapes people is that good campaigns don't get old. You can always expose them to people who haven't seen them before and they'll do better. But the environment changes, the social dynamics change, like so much changes that it can be a losing strategy to not assume that your creative will expire. Right? Even as much as we say like, well, content doesn't get old, music doesn't get old, etc.
Yeah, it's true. It's in some part, it's like it's hope and it's wishful thinking and there's truth to it, but there's a looming expiration date for reasons that we can't always perfectly pinpoint. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, even you and I, like for Indepreneur, like how often have we created ads that we thought were evergreen for customer acquisition? You know, evergreen ads or evergreen video sales campaigns that weren't so evergreen.
Right. And it's like, well, we created these campaigns in the context of like Facebook ads was like this. People had been exposed to offers like this. People were used to that. And all of those things changed. The creative didn't get old. The offer didn't get old. The ground underneath it shifted. And so it's just better to presume that that will happen than to say like, oh, this is working well. We just need to constantly find new people for it and it'll continue working. Like maybe not.
An earthquake is going to come and shake things up.
Yeah.
The fourth one is related to how you're engaging with your fans. And this is an interesting stalling factor that I wanted to talk about today, because I think this is the one that starts to creep in slowly for a lot of artists when some of the other ones that we've already talked about are true. Maybe your release cadence has started to slip or is kind of dried up because you're, you know, moving through an album cycle or something like that. Your content maybe has slowed down. Maybe it hasn't. Maybe you've been keeping up with it, but you really haven't been giving it its full 100% attention. If your traffic systems are there, often see artists slip up here in that they've got awareness campaigns running for new fan acquisition, but they're not really engaging with those fans. The question that I often ask artists here is like, well, how much are you really talking to the fans that are in your world right now? Are you sending nurturing emails, for example, is a really good one. Are you getting in the comments with your fans? When was the last time you looked at the DMs and actually answered your fans? This is an unpopular one because I think, unlike traffic systems where it can be more related to environmental factors and not necessarily like something you did or didn't do, fan engagement and how you go about it is active. And if you start to slip away from it and not do it, whether intentionally or unintentionally, it's going to have stalling effects on your ecosystem and your business for sure.
Yeah. Always pay attention.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of as simple as that, isn't it?
Yeah. There's tons of like ancient myths and theology that has to do with the idea that you should always pay attention through entirely no fault of your own, except that you didn't go above and beyond to pay attention. Like harm can befall you.
Yeah. So I think this is an interesting one. And if you're feeling stalled out at all, like I would consider asking yourself the questions that I just mentioned is like, how much are you really thinking about your fans or trying to engage with them? And this kind of goes into the fifth sort of bucket or area that I think about when it comes to a music career and it's slowing down, which is offers. And sometimes the way that you engage your fans is with making offers to them. Those can be all sorts of offers. They can be free offers like giveaways or early access or permission offers, bribes, things to grow your list. They can also be paid offers, you know, creating new merch, launching products, running sales promotions. Offers are a way to generate growth deeper into your fan base, deeper into your business. and also to generate revenue. So if you're feeling a revenue strain, that's the first place that I would look. If it's like, man, my business is stalled in terms of like the money that's actually coming in, that's the first place you look. So if you can identify that as the true stalling point or the first kind of indicator of a stalling point, I would be like, well, how many offers have you made? I had a conversation with a band not long ago where they were like, man, we're running low on funds. And it was like, okay, well, like, let's just start making offers and solve that problem. Now, they were fortunate enough that they had a fan base large enough that would start supporting those monetization efforts, which is great. That's a perfect way to start up a system and kind of pull yourself out of a stalled phase. But that's another area to look at for sure.
Yeah. And like, again, we do not expect you to, or we don't expect anybody to be superhuman here, right? The key here is to keep these factors in mind when you're planning out a large season of your career or a massive effort on your part, is to think about the eventual inevitable lull that can come in any of these areas we've gone over in this episode, and actively plan for it so that you can kick back when it happens and not stress too much. Your systems take care of it from there.
100%. Yeah. The whole purpose of this episode was to be a diagnostic for planning ahead of time, and a diagnostic for if you're feeling this way, being able to say, okay, how can I holistically look through what's going on in my music career, what's going on in my business, and what could I start focusing on tomorrow, even if it's the smallest thing to start moving things again. Definitely not for any purposes of making superhuman efforts to pull yourself out of bankruptcy or something like that. But yeah, I hope this helps you guys, especially if you're in a position where you're feeling like you're kind of stalled out. There are kind of like 5 big areas in my experience that I think artists can fall into. And these areas are sometimes independent, but usually interdependent of one another. So take a look at them if you're feeling stalled, or if you feel like there might be a slowdown on the horizon. And like Cirque said, start planning for how you can overcome that with preparation and content and a backlog and planning. And then you can kind of kick back, or let the systems do their work, the systems that you've built.
Yeah, 100%.
I hope you guys dug this. This is the same sort of process that we look at in our own business here at Indiepreneur. Same sort of stuff. Same sort of thing that we do with all of our artist clients at IndieX, with our indie founders. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had like this over the years with clients at the agency to help them kind of overcome the challenges that they're finding themselves in, or that they're just worried about finding themselves in. I think a lot of this is also about alleviating anxiety of, well, what if I start to stall out?
Yeah, literally do not plan or prepare for any massive effort without thinking that.
Yeah, 100%. So I hope you guys dug this. I hope it helps. See you next time on Creative Juice.
Peace out, y'all.
Can y'all really feel the East Coast, feel the West Coast?